Welcome to the 7th meeting of the Suffolk Downs Development Advisory Group. And in a perfectly appropriate metaphor, I can say we are rounding the far turn and heading into the home stretch. And the far turn, appropriately enough, is in Beachmont, Danny. You'll be glad to know. So this is, as I said, the 7th meeting, and this will conclude the long-awaited presentation on traffic and transportation issues, which were previewed in part 1 of the traffic and transportation agenda and will be completed here tonight. Just to give you a preview of what will come after this as we do head into the home stretch, 2 weeks from tonight we will have a community meeting sponsored by the DAG. It's going to be at the Rumney Marsh Academy, which is fairly centrally located with a lot of parking, and perhaps will attract people that haven't been able to make these meetings. That will be between 6 and 8 on the 24th. We will probably have one more DAG meeting, but possibly not. We'll see how it works out before it goes to the City Council, and we'll update you on what that agenda will be. But the agenda for tonight, as I said, is traffic and transportation. And I will turn it over to Doug Manns, who will do his usual masterful job at presenting findings, conclusions, recommendations regarding traffic mitigation.
So my name again is Tom O'Brien, and I'm going to introduce Doug, but I think I'm just going to highlight a couple of key things that I want to be sure that we say at the outset that hopefully people will remember and focus upon, you know, as we go through the details of what it is we're going to present tonight. So the first is from the very beginning of when we started on this project, when we believed that we had a shot to buy the project, we knew that we had to assemble an A team of people who would help work with us on transportation related issues. And so we reached out to VHB, yes, as a company, but really specifically we wanted John Kennedy to be with us, and John's here with us tonight. John is a transportation engineer he would be angry at me if I said how many decades of experience he has on these projects, but he has multiple decades, 5. He's holding up 5. And he's worked on every major transportation project that you can think of. And more importantly, I think what we love about John and working with John is he thinks about things outside the box. He's not just thinking about a specific question or problem that we might give him or that might come up. He's thinking about the whole region and kind of a series of improvements that might be made to make the whole region operate better. So that's number one. I just want to make sure that I identified both John as well as my partner Doug Manns, who you know very well. The second big thing I want to tell you is as we've gone through this process, and this is true from the beginning when we bought it, we knew we were going to have to spend a significant amount of money, significant amount of capital on capital improvements on the site to make it all work, including capital improvements that would be spent on pieces of our project that would be located off-site, away from our site, to make it all work. And so, from the beginning, we knew it was going to be a big number. I'm not sure we knew standing here tonight there was going to be as big a number as it is, but what you'll hear Doug say tonight is we now know that we need to spend $220 million on capital improvements, both on our site as well as off-site improvements to make this work. So that's a big number, I have to tell you. We've all worked on a lot of different projects together, but that's a big number. And let me just remind everybody, we're not a casino. We are simply a mixed-use community. We are we are trying to do the best we can to make a mixed-use community that, as we've said constantly, will be a great place for people to live, a great place for people to shop and buy a meal and enjoy walking down the street. But we want the parks to be great. We want the streets to be great. We know that the water and sewer system needs to be built from nothing. There's nothing on site today, so we know that those are all pieces that are on us to do that, but no other developers face those kinds of issues usually, right? So those are all big pieces for us. But that 220 also includes $50 million of additional expenditures for off-site improvements that we need to make, that you'll hear Doug and John talk about tonight. So that's a key number and a big piece that hopefully people will keep in mind. But it's a commitment that we knew from the get-go that we were going to have to step up and make. And so we've thought through in our underwriting and how we can make this work. And these are commitments that are doable from our perspective. The last thing I would just make, last point I would just make is we spent a lot of time, certainly from the time we purchased the site in May of 2017, but even more specifically since February of this year when we received our scoping determination from MIPA and in conjunction with the mayor and with Bob and with Frank and with the city staff to go through and do all the study work and everything else that we need to do to make the filing, the draft environmental impact report that we filed last Monday. But along the way, what you should know is for all of these transportation-related improvements, part of our obligation is to make sure that we're not just making those proposals or making these assumptions in a vacuum. So everything that you're going to see tonight has been the subject of significant numbers of meetings with MassDOT. And when I say MassDOT, I mean everything from the Secretary of MassDOT, meaning Secretary Stephanie Pollock, together with her senior staff, to the leadership of the highway administrator who reports up to the secretary, including her that person's district level chiefs who run District 4 and District 6. You may know that this site is in 2 different highway districts, just to make things a little bit more complicated. So District 4 and District 6 have gone through all these pieces with us. We've spent significant amounts of time with MBTA staff, with all those different pieces. On a separate note, as you, I think, know, we've spent time with MWRA staff and all the water folks. So the pieces that we're presenting to you tonight, these ideas, are all things that we've tested out. And by the way, we spent time with Frank and Bob and with the mayor, and as well as with the city of Boston, with the Boston Transportation Department, with the BPDA. We've gone through all these different pieces. So everything that we're presenting to you tonight is being presented to you having been vetted by all those different pieces. Now, these are sort of proposals, so we would expect people like all of you who are here tonight, as well as all the other professionals that we've met with, we would expect more comments, we would expect more thoughts. Everybody, people drive these streets, people drive these roads, and everybody's got a different opinion. What if you don't make this left work or that right work, or whatever that is? So we totally expect that, but we have vetted every piece here with all the key stakeholders that are important to make this work. So these are implementable. We can figure out how to finance them. And I would just add one last point, which is we believe in our calculations at the end of the day that even after we've added the people and the development here on site, with the improvements that we make throughout the system, we believe that we're improving the overall level of service, both on the roadways and potentially on the Blue Line as well. So we think we're making, we're not, today many of these intersections are Fs when they rank them, right? So F means it fails, like the same as when you were in high school, and F means it fails. But, so we're not standing here today saying we're taking all these intersections and turning them into As. We're not saying that. But we are saying that substantially across the board, we're taking the Fs and we're making them Cs and Ds, which are better than what they are today, which is pretty good. That requires significant investment, requires a significant amount of effort together for all of us as a team, but those are the key points that I just wanted to state at the outset. So as is my want, I always make it harder on Doug because I steal like the good conclusions before Doug gets to do it all, but those are the key takeaways that hopefully people will remember from tonight, okay? Doug Mans.
Okay, we got any questions? I think we can go. So thank you, Doug Mans with HYM. Going to first do. Let's see. So at Bob's request, we're going to read the last chapter of the book, all right, and then we're going to go through the detail, right, so that people don't get pained, waiting for it to be unveiled. But so a couple of things. So again, as Tom said, we did a comprehensive transportation study. And the reason why we call it a transportation study because it studies both transit and traffic. So it's not just traffic, it's both. And so we looked at a lot of details, both on the Blue Line, the buses, as well as the traffic analysis for the intersections. So first, detailed Blue Line and bus analysis, detailed station platform capacity analysis. So we did platform capacity analysis for both Beachmont and Suffolk Downs in detail. And this getting a little more detail. This is probably the largest traffic study done by a private developer. It's much bigger than even the casino project. We did 53 intersections, and these are the following key parameters that were included. So as Tom mentioned, we're starting, as you guys know, you live here, we're starting with roadways that have not been touched, some of them for 20, 30 years. So we're starting with some very bad deficient conditions. Today, Route 1A is an F. It's F/F. Inbound, outbound, it's just F. There is a unique thing is that in most traffic studies, they don't require you to count existing queues that exist in certain intersections. there's 400 to 450 cars that are stuck at Boardman Street that don't get through the intersection. We actually kept them in our analysis. Then, working with Frank, Stringy, City of Revere, and also with East Boston, there are 3 million square feet of other projects that are in the queue, that are in our traffic study. So we accounted for all that traffic. And by the way, many of those projects are one-off projects that don't have a lot of mitigation. Yeah, they may have improved the signal by them, but they didn't really do the kind of mitigation that we're talking about. We also had 20 years of background growth put in as well. And then we put in our vehicle trips from the complete master plan project. So I just want to say this is very comprehensive. We also think it's very conservative in many ways, but it is very comprehensive. All right, so getting to the punchline, I'll go through more of the detail. On the blue line capacity, we studied the most congested part of the corridor between Maverick Station and Aquarium. Really no point in studying Suffolk Down Station because there's plenty of capacity. We're more towards the end of the line. So we studied the pinch point. We are within MBTA policy capacity, and we're well below MBTA crush capacity. And I'll show you, we have some diagrams for that. What we're saying is that we're able to put background growth in all of our passenger trips onto the blue line station and still operates well within policy capacity or close to policy capacity. Part of this is, remember, half our trips are almost reverse commuter trips as well, too. So that's really good. The orange and red line, typically in peak hour, always operate in crush capacity, if not touching the upper limit of crush capacity. So the blue line's in really good shape. We're adding a lot of new revenue to the MBTA system without requiring them to put, they have, again, we talked about this before, they have 14 fleet system. Only 12 cars are in service, or 12 train sets are in service. We add the new revenue without forcing them to put the other 2 train sets into service too. So that's a really good thing for the MBTA. This is a very net positive for them in the early days. And obviously we did the platform capacity. So there is sufficient platform capacity both at Beachmont and Suffolk Down Station. And so we'll go through those. We'll show you that. As Tom said, we're proposing over $50 million in off-site traffic mitigation measures. 30 intersections are being approved. Some of them are major overhauls. Some of them are more minor updates, but 30. The biggest one, obviously, we talked about this before, is the Route 1A corridor. It says between Boardman and Winthrop, but obviously it goes much farther south than Boardman. It's the approach to Boardman. That takes it from 2 lanes in each direction to 3 lanes. And to give you a sense, and I have more details on that, but to give you a sense of that, after doing all of that traffic analysis, it goes from an FF to a CD in our analysis, which is quite impressive that we actually improve Route 1A corridor above what it's operating today, even though we put all this other traffic in. Now, again, part of that is we're adding capacity into that corridor. We'll go in more detail, but we have a reconstruction of Winthrop Avenue, Beachmont Square. We're not calling it Donnelly Square anymore. Donnelly Square is part of Beachmont Square, but Beachmont Square. Route 1 and Route 16, we showed this last time. So again, and in many cases, we have some areas that we improve. A lot of the intersections we're simply maintaining, but to put that much traffic through the system and maintain, that is great. Now, there are a few intersections, and this is in the detailed traffic study. So we're going to give you an overview tonight. Again, we studied 53 intersections. There is a lot of detail in the traffic study. Now, there's 2 places. It's already been submitted as part of the DEIR last Monday, okay? MIPA, City of Boston, and City of Revere are all getting the exact same traffic study, right? Because it's comprehensive. It's one traffic study for the site, so you guys will be able to see that. So if you're bored and want to go to sleep, there's 170 pages in the DEIR. That's a summary of the traffic study, and then there's the actual full traffic study too as well. So anyways, but the reason I was going there is that there are also still a few intersections that we don't add a lot of traffic to that we haven't quite figured out yet. So we're going to still need to be working with the City of Revere and the City of Boston on them. But again, the major ones we definitely have addressed. So these are other improvements. Again, just a reminder, our on-site improvements, we're trying to encourage non-vehicular modes of travel. We showed this slide before, we'll show again tonight. We're adding almost 5.7 miles of new bicycle facilities just within our site. So remember, our cycle track network, our bicycle lanes, we're talking about at least 5 new blue bike stations that are spread across the site. We have 2 on-site shuttle routes. We're talking about 4 or 5 different shuttles that go to like North Station, Seaport District, South Station, as well as the commuter rail station in Chelsea. And obviously the extensive on-site community pass and pedestrian ways. Our goal is that we actually do want to push people to the blue line. It has capacity, it's the best thing to do, and it reduces traffic. So that is the punchline. So if I go forward, come on. This clicker doesn't like me. There we go. So again, this is the master plan that you guys have seen. This is just the Revere portion. Now I'm kind of getting back into the details. I might switch sides, I don't know. Come on. So again, I'm showing you the open space system. Only reason why, because again, our on-site roadway network was really formed around the open space system. So when we designed this site, we really designed it around the 40 acres of open space system. So here's the roadway network. So again, except for portions of Tomasello Drive, which exists today, and some of them, by the way, are not roads. They're just simply like asphalt paving that's like 100 feet wide. Everything else we have to create on our site. So this whole roadway network is being built by us. All the utility network is being built by us. So as part of the $220 million, we have $110 million worth of on-site costs just to build this out. So it's a huge amount of money. These are really public streets, right, or public right-of-ways, right? City of Revere, we're also maintaining these for the City of Revere into the future too as well. So a very important point. But here's our roadway network. Obviously, we're talking about a full signalization at Boardman, Tomasello and Route 1A. It's not on this plan, but we're also talking about full signalization at Furlong Drive and Route 1A. And so the idea is that, again, our basic concept is to try to shift the traffic back to where it should be, which is on Route 1A.
Doug, before you move
Yep.
from this, it might be worth noting that Tomasello Road is transferred for virtually its entire alignment, not just at the Winthrop Avenue.
Correct, yeah. So today, Tomasello actually is more midpoint here. It dives in, and then it kind of comes back to the store and then goes through here. So the only segment that remains in its current location is here. And that road varies from 2 lanes in each direction to, well, the width of 2 lanes, but just wide pavement. But we'll be reconstructing Tomasello really into a city standard street, right? Because today, most of it's not city standard. It's just basically paved that goes off into parking lots, or there's Jersey barriers or blocks. Correct, and the idea is to put it along the perimeter of the site. And again, the shopping plaza will still meet it at the same intersection. And then again, the other major road is then we have a park road that is a secondary street that feeds through the site. But the idea is that the main access point, again, is back to Tomasello with the goal of getting it back to Route 1A. And we'll go in more detail on this in Winthrop Avenue, but obviously we do realign Tomasello Drive to make it mid-block between North Shore Road and Revere Beach Parkway, which is very purposeful because there's not enough queuing space right now between North Shore Road and Tomasello Drive, which really monkeys up how that operates. So, and we'll go into more details of that. Come on. Oh. Okay, so bicycle network, we talked about this before, but still important. So the dark blue is the cycle track network. And again, the cycle track network is a raised 2-way cycle path that is not on the street, but it's up on the curb level, offset from the street typically 4 to 5 feet. And it's meant to be thorough all the way through the site, all the way through the park. We have a new one on Winthrop Avenue, and we purposely connect it back to Wally Street. And so very extensive cycle track network. And then you do also have the more traditional bike lanes, which are the light blue as well. You also are seeing the 5 locations of Blue Bikes. We used to call them Hubway, but now, Blue Cross Blue Shield owns them, so they're Blue Bike. They'll probably be Google Bikes in 5 years. So there is no host agreement right now with the City of Revere on the Blue Bikes, but the idea is that we hope there would be. But the goal is that we're willing to put them anywhere on the site. And we're obviously open up to other, dockless bike stations as well, too, things like that. Pedestrian network, we've seen this, but it's just very extensive. These are the loops, These are the loops that we've shown before. We actually went in and started to look at some of our community paths and other things, so we show a longer loop for the first time. Again, the key one, though, is that there's literally a 1-mile loop inside our central common. Just, again, it's amazing. It's a really large central common. Okay, this just shows loading and entrances, so that the red are entrances to the buildings. The triangles are loading. The key item there is just to, again, to show that we're not putting any loading on the main roads like Winthrop Avenue. The idea is that, these are still a front of the building. And so the loadings are almost always typically on side streets throughout the site. That helps efficiency of traffic going through it. It helps keep disruption on Winthrop Avenue down. But again, the loading docks are internal to the site. They're also internal to the building. This is one of the questions people had before. So these are enclosed loading docks off the street in the buildings. Okay, so transit-oriented development. Again, you guys have seen most of those, but again, I just want to at least go back through it. So again, this is just the current MBTA transit map. Again, our 2 blue line stations. The big thing is We have the new 119 bus stop on site next to that, which did open and is operating. One of the things that we're working with the MBTA on, we talked about this before, as our site gets built out, we'll work with the MBTA and the city of Revere, because that 119 may take a further ride into the site and loop back out. I mean, for now, the only way in and out is Tomasello, so we have that turnaround there as well. And again, as part of our transportation study, we also studied the impacts on the buses, and I'll go through that. Key item for us is really important. I would say almost 80% of our site is within walking distance of the Suffolk Downs T station. This really, truly is a TOD, transit-oriented development site. This shows you the walk sheds from the 2 T stations. This shows you the walk sheds from the buses. Come on, okay. Even though we're within the walking distance, we're still committed to doing a 2 shuttle route system. So an inner shuttle loop and an outer shuttle loop. This is privately maintained and funded by us. We obviously have heard comments from the community about, well, can they start making stops off the site too as well? Something we'll definitely explore. It's just that we got to think about demand, capacity, what it means as we go through it. Obviously, the other thing too, the 119 does come into the site and leave the site as well too, and the 120 MBTA bus literally, gets really close to our site too on the Orient Heights side. So again, that's a key item there. We've seen these before, but we talked about we're obviously doing shuttle routes. Seaport, that wants to advance. South Station. Sorry, there's a little bit of time delay on this. Come on. Okay. There you go. North Station. I'm going to stretch. Oh, now it's going backwards. North Station. Sorry, I'm blocking people, but I'll just get through these. The other key one we talked about is obviously Chelsea Station commuter rail is already open. In the interim, about having a shuttle bus service that goes to that Chelsea commuter rail station, so we pick up the Newburyport and Rockport lines. That's in the interim. Obviously, the one that we're more interested in, and I'm sure the city of Revere, is interested in too as well, is the transfer at Wonderland Station. That would be a very effective transfer, much easier for people to get to our site, and it would be a blue line transfer right to the site. At full build-out, we would talk to the MBTA. This just shows you the new Silver Line routing. At full build-out, we think we'd have enough demand, instead of us having a shuttle bus route, that we could actually get the Silver Line to come to our site and be like an SL5 or an SL6, a branch line, that would basically go up Route 1 and just cut right into our site and can do a loop around. So we'd be excited about that. So what was the transportation study based upon? And I think it's really important to note. So we based it upon Program A, which was the office-intensive program, and that generates more vehicular trips than residential, right? So remember, we had a Program A and a Program B. Program A was kind of like the Amazon-type program, 8 million square feet of office and lab, 7 million square feet of residential, 500,000 square feet of retail, hotel, and then we had a Program B that was more only 5.5 million square feet of commercial, and the residential up to 10,000 units. Again, we're doing, for the traffic study, the more intensive office study program. So again, it's meant to be conservative. So as Tom mentioned, we've been working very detailed with MassDOT and MEPA. And MassDOT and MEPA asked us to run the study first using their regional model. It's called CTPS. So MassDOT holds this big regional model that basically is the entire, I guess, talk about it's like 495 and in, right? So it's a huge model. It's a very car-centric model. In fact, we think it's a very conservative model. I'll look at John, but I'll say we have trouble with this model. But again, MassDOT asked us to run it. And the reason why I'm pointing it out is that it suggests that public transit usage in peak hours is only 25%. That's very shockingly no low number for a transit-oriented development site, especially when East Boston is at 50% today. But we still ran it that way. But we also worked with MassDOT to come up with a TOD, transit-oriented development parameters. So we ran a second model. So again, not only did we run a transportation model, we ran 2. The reason why was 2 things. MBTA was concerned that this number was too low to analyze the impacts on their system because they don't believe this is going to be what's going to happen at the site. And we were concerned too as well. So we ran it with 39% public transit. So because this is more in keeping with a site like Assembly Row or North Point, or more transit-oriented development sites. We also looked at other precedents that are in DC. So again, so you have 2 programs. The good news is that, well, besides our time and John's time, you get the worst case of both worlds at this point. So the worst case traffic solution and the worst case transit solution. And we studied both, and so we'll go through those, which I think is really important. I think one anomaly you should look at, rideshare has increasingly become a bigger part of the market, as you guys know. So these are Ubers and Lyfts. And so those have also become a bigger proportion of what's happening, how people get around. So bus routes, so a little bit out of sequence, but we did study the bus routes as well. We studied the 119, the 450, and all the other buses. The only bus that really gets additional ridership is the 119 bus, which is about a 1.1% increase. Again, the 119 is really a feeder to the Blue Line and more of the neighborhoods. Our folks really won't be taking the 119 to try to get to the T stations. But even with the increase, it does still meet policy capacity. And sometimes we exceed policy capacity in some instances, but we're still below crush. The 450, which is more of a regional route, very marginal ridership growth. And there's almost no impact on these other ones because some of these buses go right downtown. So the idea, why would you get on a bus to go through the tunnel if you just get on the Blue Line and go downtown? And we already talked about this, but the idea is this is a 15 to 20 year project. We'll be working closely with the City of Revere and East Boston MBTA to work on bus routing and see what patterns may change. Oh. All right, so these are the MBTA analysis for the Blue Line, or this is our analysis of the Blue Line capacity. So I'll kind of go through this. So first, the green bar is the policy capacity of the MBTA for the Blue Line. The blue represents existing ridership. And now this is inbound. So if you look down, this is a time scale, 30-minute intervals. So this is the inbound. And again, this is between Maverick and Aquarium. So as you can notice, like, what you would expect, the Blue Line is very one-directional type line. A lot more people going inbound in the morning than coming outbound. And so this is the peak ridership coming in. The white that's in between, this little small dash, is background growth, and the orange is our new growth. The reason why I bring it up is that, okay, so this is the policy with 12 train sets being in operation, and we're almost always below the policy capacity still. Again, and I'm not joking, when we did the Government Center Garage with VHB, the orange line is running consistently well up into the crush capacity during peak hours, and the red line too as well. That's why they're trying to get new cars to try to bring that down and new signaling. The second green line represents if the Blue Line does signal improvements and puts all 14 cars into service, they can actually get a bump. So we're even below that. And again, so we have a lot of running room. And all the yellow represents new revenue with very little impact to the MBTA system. And again, this is on the CTPS, so this is less transit riders. That's inbound. Outbound. Again, this also shows you really the dramatic, again, getting back into that reverse commute type thing that we have going on. But again, you can see we're well below the policy. Now, when we go to our TOD parameters, you're going to see a jump. So there's the TOD parameters. You do see a jump. And so we're starting to get a couple bars that just get over in a 30-minute segment right over that policy capacity, still well within crush capacity. And again, you see a little bit bigger jump on the reverse commute. So this, again, is inbound. And here's outbound. And so that's honestly an amazing story. There's a lot of concerns and questions, particularly in East Boston, because East Boston experiences the Maverick to Aquarium, pretty detailed. But we thought it was a really incredible outcome. And even if we exceed 39% transit ridership, there's still capacity there to be had. So platform capacity analysis, we just, again, the platforms were built full length for the trains, so we do not have platform capacity issues either with the CTPS model or with our analysis. This is actually 2028. I'm going to go to 2038. Hold on a second. So 2038 conditions, again, these shouldn't be grades, but you get a sense of that, we're still operating B and C's or A's throughout this. And by the way, this analysis was not just standing on the platforms. This was also exit stairways. This was also gateways. This was really a comprehensive analysis to make sure that the infrastructure is in place. This is not about code changes, though. We're still doing the review of both T stations for code-related upgrades and things like that. So there still will be improvements to these stations. But the answer is that the platforms don't need to be lengthened or expanded. They have enough capacity. We also, VHB did this analysis assuming, this is the little footnote at the bottom, this assumed one train dropped out of service. So this is actually not based upon 12 train sets running, it's based upon 11 train sets running. So they lost a train for some reason, they didn't put another one in service, so there's more people waiting on the platforms for a train to come. So that's really the transportation analysis. The other thing we talked about, which VHB has studied, again, this kind of, bike to the beach. So the extension of the East Boston Greenway from Constitution Beach all the way up to Revere Beach. And we did some more detailed studying of that. Go to the next one. And so the way it looks right now is that here's Constitution Beach. It would really be kind of sidewalk and bicycle connections until we get to Bennington Street. But once we get to Bennington Street, the community path, for the most part, can run in the right-of-way all the way up to Beachmont Square. And we're doing that partly as a road diet, using the shoulder. But the idea is that we could have a robust community path that gets all the way up to Beachmont Square. It gets a little tight in Beachmont Square. We're actually just talking about this with John today as well, so we're still working how it gets through Beachmont Square. Once we get through Beachmont Square, and the idea is to get it up to Elliott. We obviously know the City of Revere is working on Elliott, so how it wraps around the circle we're still working on. But the good news is that there is very much a viable solution for this Greenway extension to go all the way up. And again, it's more of a regional connector, but it's still very important from our perspective. All right, so
before you get into traffic, maybe we ought to just see if there are any comments or questions on the transit and Greenway issues. You must be very persuasive. Joanne?
You can ask questions.
Yeah. I was going to say, one of the things that Doug had talked about was a 25% transit share during the peak hours. During the rest of the hours, we're at 18.4%, which is very low when you start looking at the East Boston neighborhoods in terms of the 50 to 55% use. So 25% that CTBS has identified was a concession to increase what the model had originally said, but they're still holding us to 18 or 19% daily.
I'll give you the politically correct response we got from some MBTA personnel and planners that we were working with. The answer was, what? That was really their response. So the good news is that they can see the higher demand as well, too. Yep. Oh, sorry, Counselor.
Thank you. Will, I don't know if this question was answered, but will the MBTA train stations be responsible for cleaning up their properties? Because right now, Beachmont train station.
That was the MBTA cutting you off, probably. So the answer is, obviously the MBTA should be fully responsible for cleaning their stations. It's something that we can mention to Dina. We can definitely talk to the MBTA about it. These are going to be, just like you guys, this is going to be our front doors. Our MBTA stations want them to be clean. So it's something that we can definitely talk about. Yeah, so we've been, unfortunately, it's taken longer to get a license agreement from the MBTA to go study the two. So we are doing a code review, a detailed code review, and existing conditions study of both stations, both Beachmont and Revere. And I'm sure when we go through that, some of those things are going to come up. And then the idea is that we're obviously going to work with the MBTA to try to figure out a way that we can, help them, as well as hopefully they can leverage on their own state funds, that we can actually clean both stations up. This is a relative term. Beachmont's in much better shape than Suffolk Downs Station. Suffolk Downs Station is going to need some, real work because it really got passed over, because there wasn't much ridership, so it got skipped. But again, those improvements were still like 15 years ago too. So, but the answer is yes, we are studying them, and then we'll have to work out with the City of Revere and Boston as well as the MBTA what improvements should be done, especially as we build out the site.
Could I ask a question with regard to Suffolk Downs, which is not directly relevant to this discussion, but there's a very long distance along Bennington Street that is kind of impermeable, in part because of the Blue Line tracks. Is there any consideration being given to the somewhat reconfiguration of Suffolk Downs Station to allow perhaps some intermediate pedestrian crossing, which the station itself could serve, depending on how it's designed?
Yeah, this has definitely been brought up. I think you can pass over the station without going through the fare gates today. Obviously, that's in very rough shape too. I mean, the ramps are, spalling and there's things like that. I mean, if the MBTA disposes of the parking lot, there may be an opportunity to use a new development to help cross. So we did something like this at North Point where we actually used the building and go over a part of our garage to kind of create a new pedestrian pathway. Other than that, it's very challenging because obviously, we talked about this also where Sales Creek crosses under the tracks. The problem is there's no headroom, right? There's not enough room, or without, scuba diving. So we have looked at it. The unfortunate part, the amount of infrastructure that's between us and Bennington Street makes it very difficult. But I do think the goal would be is that we definitely don't want to close off the passage that allows people to go up and over the Suffolk Downs T station, because otherwise you have to walk all the way down Wally Street to Bennington to get back over. So,
Ruggles Station, for example, on the Orange Line, I'd be willing to bet you there are more pedestrians that use it between the two portions of the northeastern campus than transit riders.
Yep.
So it does serve a pedestrian access issue if there is an opportunity to do that.
no, and again, I think our goal too is that, we're going to have residents that are going to want to get to the Belle Isle Marsh or get to Bennington Street sooner, so there are destination points. I think it's something we got to see how the structural conditions come back. Again, and also though, those things from our experience at North Point can be very expensive very fast. And so that's something else that we just need to keep in mind.
Doug, if I could, my first one. To go back on the T issue that Joanne raised in your response, and I guess I want to try and understand, because it sounds like HYM has been having conversations with the T about what needs to be done and trying to convince the T to do the things that they need to do with these stations. And obviously Suffolk Downs is in worse shape than Beachmont, but that doesn't say Beachmont's not in good shape.
Yep, correct.
So my point in all of this, and the point I've raised before, and I guess I'll ask the question, city, state delegation, HYM, working together to put pressure on the T to get these things done. When I look at what happened at Assembly Square and over in Medford and Station Landing, they built 2 new stations. We're asking them to renovate 2 existing stations for a project that's probably just about as big, yeah?
Yep. So I think, 2 things. We're already committed to, and we're spending the money to do the detailed code review and building, existing conditions assessment. So we've already committed to helping out with that. That's the next step. I think once those come back, we'll have a much better sense of what needs to be done. And to be honest, I don't think that has been done by the MBTA and these stations since they got renovated, 15 years ago. And so that'll be a good starting point, because then that'll help us understand. Because the other thing too is for us, we just don't know what needs to be done yet, but it'll come out of that. And I think the goal also too is that, as we said before, the MBTA is going to get a significant amount of new revenue coming off of these stations as we build out, but it's also a phased development. So some of those improvements might be phased over time.
And here again, and as I've said from the get-go and all along, I'm not looking to put all of this on your shoulders, and I guess I'm looking to the city and state delegation. And I guess what I'm not hearing is that there is that cohesive group that's going to bang on the MBTA's door to say, get it done.
Yeah, and I'll say
There
this
is
too.
that cohesive group that's going to bang on the door of the MBTA and get it done.
Yeah. So I think I would agree. So I think there's a cohesive group. I think what we're missing is, which we're working on, is getting the detailed code assessment so that people can see it. So anything else up, please?
Just 3 questions. First, looking back at the CTPS model and the long-term ridership numbers here, you mentioned earlier that right now we have 12 additional trains that are being used on the MBTA Blue Line. Would the 2 that are not being used be sufficient to reach the threshold that is being projected here?
So the upper green is improved signalization plus the addition of the 2 train car sets going into service.
And then with the potential crush capacity in red, is that also, would that mean, would those 2 also?
So today, and again, this crush capacity is already available today, right? So again, this goes back to, so the first 2 lines are what the MBTA is running today. So the MBTA operates in the crush capacity. They don't like to, but on the other lines, they do run well into the crush. So if you've been on the red line during rush hour, that's crush capacity. And again, this is one segment, right? So this is literally this is the trip from Maverick to Aquarium. People aren't experiencing these policy capacities earlier or after, because as soon as you get past that pinch point, people get off at Aquarium, people get off, well, everyone gets off, someone gets off the state, and they get off Government Center Garage. So this is a unique point in time. But the first two lines are existing MBTA operations. The second two lines, the higher lines, are when signal improvements are made so they can put the other two train cars into service and they get to 4-minute headways. So that's what we have, and that's in the report too as well.
Also, maybe piggybacking off of this question too is, so Wonderland is also a designated TOD, and there's quite a number of developments happening there. Is there a way that we can also see comparisons of ridership numbers there, and also the pitch point here that is also being measured because of the increased ridership at Wonderland, not just from the new development, but also for the North Shore, and being a connecting point into Boston. So is there something that we can also look at?
Perhaps I could just address that in part. As Doug noted, all of those projects at Waterfront Square and elsewhere along the boulevard and so on are already factored into these numbers. But the indications are that the transit usage out of Waterfront Square is quite comparable to Boston, 50% or more. So it is a very high level of transit use, probably higher than what is projected in this model. But I think there is enough white space there to suggest available capacity before we run into any real problems.
Thank you. And then my last question, has this site also been designated a TOD? And if so, has there been a health impact assessment conducted?
So we are a TOD, but I don't think we've been designated as a TOD site. So I don't think we've done a health impact assessment. So we can talk about that afterwards too. That's a new term for me. So happy to talk about that. So awesome. Okay. Other questions on transit before we move on to? Okay. I thought there was a question. I was more worried that John was going to ask me a question.
I don't understand transit.
All right, so I'm going to get a part way through this. I'm going to turn it over to John, so I get into dangerous territory here. Again, we talked about this in the beginning. Again, we already kind of did the final chapter, but 53 intersections. You know, we talked about what's included in the traffic study, so pretty extensive traffic study. And again, we're studying it two ways, under CTPS parameters, under TOD parameters. We also study it at 2028 and 2038. And the reason why is that we're building out part of our site. So the idea is to give the state and the cities a way to look what happens in 10 years and then what happens in 20 years so they can kind of see. Our gut is that there could be big changes. We think this is a very conservative model. There could be continuing decline in car ownership. There could be increased, I mean, there's a lot of other factors that are going to happen in the 20 years, but again, we tend to be conservative. This shows you where the $50 million of off-site traffic mitigation is going. We're not going to go through all these intersections, but obviously the big ones are, I just lose my, Route 1A reconstruction, Winthrop Avenue reconstruction, Route 16 and Route 1 interchange, which we'll talk about. And then obviously we're looking at a lot of the intersections as we go up the Route 60 corridor as well too. So very important there. So over 30 intersections. One of the other things too that we did, again, and I don't want to say it's because of lack of investment by the state, but since these intersections have not been touched in a long period of time, 17 of these intersections exceed the state average for a crash ratio, which is honestly, from ever doing a traffic study before, I don't think we've ever had these many intersections exceed. Then again, we've never done 53 either. So that means that we, with the City of Revere, MassDOT, DCR, East Boston, depending on which intersection was whose jurisdiction, did site walks for every single one of these and did a road safety audit, right? So to detail, to look at why are the crashes happening, where are they happening, what's the angle, and are there improvements that we can then incorporate into what VHB is doing for mitigation? So again, it was part of the comprehensive study. This is also included, will be included as an exhibit into the submission of the City of Revere, but it's in the DEIR. So again, I already kind of stole the thunder on this one, but again, this is the first major improvement, the major reconstruction of Route 1A, basically from all the way down here below Boardman Street, all the way up to Winthrop Avenue. Today, this is 2 lanes in each direction. We're going to go to 3 lanes in each direction, and we're doing it by really cannibalizing the grass median that exists in the middle of the street. And it basically increases the capacity from 2,100 vehicles in each direction to 3,300 vehicles in each direction. We also add in 2 new bus pull-offs, because again, we have a series of regional buses that are running through the corridor, and we're actually putting a bus pull-off on our property here, and then a bus pull-off hopefully on Massport property across, which will allow some of these buses to get out of the travel lane, pick up people, drop them off, and then continue to move, which is really important. Currently, at Boardman and Route 1A, as you guys know today, it operates as a level of service F in both directions. At full build, we're at a level of service C and D at our TOD full build. And then we also are still incorporating 5-foot shoulders for bicycles and breakdown use. Again, it's a very limited right-of-way corridor, and so we're balancing what MassDOT's priorities are, but they want bicycles to be able to use it if they want, but they also need to be able to have breakdown lanes as well. So that's something that we've worked on with them. I'm going to probably turn it over to John here so we can start to go through this because it starts to get into the more detailed design of this. But again, one of the key things is that the reason why the corridor starts to work really well too is that we're changing from a 4-phase operation at the intersections to a 2-phase operation. But on that note, I'm in dangerous territory. I'm going to give it to John.
Thank
Doug-
you. I don't have to bail you out.
Doug, if I could, before you turn it over to John, I guess I just have one question on what you mentioned about it's at an F right now. It's going to be at a C and D level.
Yep.
So it's improvement, but there's still room for more improvement. Okay, maybe you can. Well, so my only question, and I was going to ask, and maybe you'll address it, John, is that once again, this is $50 million of improvements that HYM is undertaking, correct? Where is the state in all of this, and how much are they contributing to maybe take that C to a B, and so forth? So.
I would say 2 things. So, I mean, the state is, we've met with District 4, we met with Secretary Pollock, we met with the Highway Division, going through all of these. MassDOT is doing other improvements. They're doing some improvements right now on Copeland Circle, right? So they do have their own capital plan too as well. I think the good thing for us is that we're identifying a lot of items that really has drawn their attention to this corridor. Because to be honest, MassDOT has not done, unless they have to, they're not doing a comprehensive study of the corridor. So I think for the first time they have the information like you guys have, which is now they suddenly see it. We're trying to address the major bottlenecks, particularly the areas where we're adding most of our traffic to. As we get further away from our site, our traffic starts to go down, but again, some of that will be there. But so again, I think MassDOT will become definitely much more involved as we go forward. And we also will start to identify other things that are really more regional issues, some of them which Revere is already aware of, that the state should be addressing in the next 10 to 15 years anyways. But we're doing major improvements now.
Yeah, and not to belabor, but I guess it just seems to me that at the point in time that you're undertaking all of this work and spending $50 million, and I know it's less than that in this corridor, it would seem to me that MassDOT should be working with you and identifying and providing resources to maybe take it one step further, instead of having to come in afterwards and do other things to raise it up.
Yeah. And I will say, I'll tell you, MassDOT.
We agree, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm asking. I'm
We
trying
agree. We
to.
would like your help in making that clear.
Well, this
I
again goes
might-
back to the collection.
Yeah, I might just say that the city on transit as well as on traffic has also asked HYM to identify projects beyond their purview that would be beneficial regionally and which we could all work together on, similar to the MBTA. So they're doing this in part at the request of the cities of both Revere and Boston. As Doug pointed out, this has not been studied for a very long time, and you're kicking into gear something that has been a long time coming, but I think out of it will come projects beyond your capability that still need to be done with our support as well as yours.
And some of which the state has known about for 20 years.
25 years.
Yeah,
Well,
25 years.
and
So
therein lies my
yeah.
point, you know, like you guys are identifying it, you know, it would seem to me that they could be pitching in more to
Yeah.
kind of help make this better, okay?
Well, and I think our
Let's
50
talk.
million is going to drive them to some of those conclusions where, once we do this 50 million, so it unlocks capacity, right? Well, that capacity starts to move. And eventually it's going to get to the point where it's going to hit something that the state needs to fix, and again, they should have fixed 30 years ago. And I'm sure we can talk about those two as well. But I want to get over to John, so.
Can I just say one quick thing on this topic? I'm not going to do it with a microphone, so I'm just going to say it, okay? There is resistance, okay? And so we do need your help.
Oh, I'm sure
When
there
we meet
is.
with the state, when we go through these issues, we get resistance. And the resistance, a sympathetic ear for me, I think the resistance is they're anxious that they don't have enough resources, they're anxious that they've not been able to hire enough staff, they're anxious about a lot of different fronts. But I'm just gonna say it, you know, after 4 years, you gotta have figured out what you want for revenue, you gotta have figured out who you can hire, you gotta do all those things, and we all need to work collectively. This is a huge issue.
Exactly.
And it's true not just for us on this corridor, it's true throughout the whole region, right? And it hasn't come up at all in the current campaign season, not one time. And we should all work together on these things, and we should overcome the resistance, and we need to make sure that people understand it's time to make these improvements. And we're happy to do our share, but, you know, part of what we anticipate is we might get some pushback from these folks, but these are changes that need to be made, and we need to all work together to make these happen.
Just to reiterate that, I would say that the solution, for example, to the Route 1 North issue has been on the table for many, many years. We have gotten the same resistance that you've been sensing. What we are hoping is that adding HYM to the mix will create a critical mass to get the political support we need to have things done that we've all known needed to be done. We have Beta Engineering working with us, for example, on those issues. Exactly. So I think bringing HYM on board beyond the $50 million that you spend is politically significant. We really now have a champion that has some credibility and some political influence that can make this all happen. So we couldn't agree more.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to run through some of our detailed level improvements quickly. I'll start with the Route 1A corridor in Boston, essentially with the Marriott Hotel. Other way. There we go. It starts around the Marriott courtyard, and we start to add a third lane, and then we're into a full third lane mode by the time we get to the end of the Marriott property line. That third lane northbound continues all the way up to Winthrop Avenue. In some cases, the southbound traffic is always carried in at least 3 lanes from Winthrop Avenue. I'll show that in a minute. But there are areas where it's 4 lanes, where we're providing a left turn or a turnaround lane. The basic concept here is part of something that is called, it's a federal highway initiative. One of their design initiatives that they try to push across the country and get people to understand. It's called Michigan Lefts, it's called displaced left turns, it's called any number of things. But the way it works is, as Doug had mentioned, traffic signals work, we refer to them as phases. Main Street is phase 1, side street is phase 2. But sometimes you add a left turn lane. That makes phase 3. Sometimes you split or do something with the side street crossing. That becomes phase 4. For each phase that gets added, the capacity gets reduced by about 10%. So the idea is we're trying to take everything down from what is a 4-phase signal at Boardman Street today. We want to reduce that to 2 phases, and we're adding the lane, which is why we can say we're increasing capacity from 2,100 to 3,300 vehicles per hour per direction. This design was based on something that has never been done before in the state. I'll go back to the casino days. We put a helicopter over the Route 1A corridor, measuring the back of Q. In the evening, it was back to the airport. There were 400 vehicles trapped in that queue between the airport and Boardman Street. When we do a traffic study, we normally count what's getting through the intersection, and that's our basis of design. In this case, we started with what's getting through the intersection and added 400 vehicles to it because that was the demand to get through. So our base was 2,500 vehicles northbound in the afternoon. Then we added the 3 million square feet, and we've been through what was added and everything else. So we're actually dealing with some pretty large numbers, but we've got capacity to handle it. To get back to the question about why not do better than level of service D or C, because you take so much extra land for so little benefit. The level of service is based on average vehicle delay. F is 90 seconds or above. In the case of Boardman Street, it's almost 6 minutes. So I could say it's an F6 or an F7 or an F8, just based on delay. Level of service D, and Matt, please, 50, 60 seconds of delay average, that's quite a difference when we start talking about a level of service D operation here with an average vehicle delay of 60 seconds versus 9 minutes. Again, it's a pretty significant improvement even out to that design year. To get to level of service A, I'd need 5 lanes in each direction on Route 1A. I'd take all of this property that I really don't need to, because in an urban area, or when you go through much of the country, you want it designed to level C. When you're in an urban area, you want it designed to level D. And when you're in an area like Boston, you're happy with E. Okay, so that's why we won't ever try for an A or a B.
And John, those are measurements at peak periods, is that correct?
The peak hour, and it's adjusted to a peak 15 minutes by factors that are included in the model. So,
Off-peak, it could well be an A or a B.
a B.
Yeah, a B.
So the concept that I'm going to stick with Boardman Street here. At Boardman Street today is aligned with 2 lanes coming up Boardman Street, and then a double left turn lane. Boardman Street on the other side is 2 lanes. Because of the double left coming up from East Boston or Bennington Street, it has to be split phase because 2 left turns can't run simultaneously with crossing traffic. Then the left turns are there in place, but the idea of taking it down to 2 phases says we're going to run the main street and we're going to run Boardman Street left turns. Those are our 2 phases. There will be no more direct left turn from Route 1A southbound onto Boardman Street. All that demand, and it's not all that demand, it's about 150 to 200 vehicles, are going to go straight through down to the U-turn that's being provided, make the U-turn and come back and then directly enter Boardman Street as a free flow movement. The delay, and we've got to prove these calculations to the BTD commissioner, and we will show that the time under this system to get down to Boardman Street and to make that movement through, make the U-turn back and directly turn onto Boardman Street is quicker than waiting for the left turn phase today from 1A southbound onto Boardman Street. So that's the basic thing. Coming out of the other side of Boardman Street, when the left turns are running here, the right turns coming out of Boardman Street on the other side will turn right and stop. They'll be stored until it's time for them to go. We also have a pedestrian crossing provided. But that's the basic design of a super street. Traffic headed to the north or traffic wanting to get into into Boardman Street on this side won't be able to do it directly. They'll have to go down to the side driveway at Thomasello where there'll be a U-turn provided and they can come back. Speaking of that, this is the U-turn for the movement from Boardman Street. It's going to mix with site traffic, come back and make that U-turn to get to Boardman Street. We're also providing another U-turn lane between Waldemar and Boardman for site-related traffic, trying to keep them on the regional system. We don't want to send them all the way through Boardman because we're going to start overloading that last U-turn lane. So we're going to put another U-turn lane in, this one only for passenger vehicles. So the U-turn is here. It will be under signal control as part of a coordinated system, and we've proven that we're going to get 3,000 to 3,300 vehicles in each direction through this coordinated system. But the other part of this, anybody headed to the backside, to Waldemar Avenue doesn't even have to deal with the lower turnaround or with the Boardman Street thing. They're going to have direct access via this U-turn lane to come back into Waldemar. The side driveway itself opens up from the 2-lane configuration to 4 at the intersection with 2 right turns and 2 left turns. Again, trying to keep the amount of time that's given to the side driveway no longer than the time that is going to be provided for the pedestrians to cross the street. That is our basic gauge in how this 2-phase operation has to work. The jug handle, no changes except 3 lanes in each direction.
That will be integrated too.
Yes, everything is coordinated. Every signal here, while we're talking about new signals, the turnarounds and everything else, everything will be coordinated. So somebody who makes it through the jug handle signal at the south end is going to be progressed all the way through Winthrop Ave, or all the way through Furlong Drive at the north end. Same thing in the morning. Somebody who passes Furlong Drive is going to be progressed all the way through the system. The last few vehicles may not make it. The first few vehicles may be delayed a little bit as they approach something because the queue in front of them hasn't started to move. But again, it's all progression. At Furlong Drive, we're going to break the median. 2-phase operation again, no direct left turn from Route 1, from Route 1 southbound. There's no direct left turn from 1A southbound into the site. Those vehicles have to use the jug handle to come back. One of the best parts of this design is this on-ramp from Winthrop Avenue. I'm sure many people experience it on a daily basis. Today, traffic on that ramp has to merge with the 2 lanes on Route 1A southbound. Under this design, they're entering their own lane, and they stay in their own lane all the way up to the Marriott. Or they can change lanes or whatever. They're not going to be forced to merge under yield sign control or anything else. And we have to end the 3rd lane at some point northbound, and that will be at the Winthrop Avenue off-ramp. So there'll be a lot of mixing that goes on with traffic in this area from the jug handle down, with people moving over and concentrating in 2 lanes so they can get up over the bridge. But that's the super street. Winthrop Avenue. A couple of things on this. I think we were here last time. We heard some comments. You now see a median break in front of the fire station to allow vehicles out of the fire station without going down to North Shore Road and making a U-turn. At North Shore Road, we are looking to eliminate a Delta Island, pull traffic a little bit farther away from the Sales Creek crossing. And again, this is part of our idea that downplays local streets, and we consider North Shore Road a local street in this case because of the development density and because of the speeds, even though it's a state control roadway. So again, and we're going to, knowing that we want this intersection to work because of the location compared to Tomasello Drive and the actual spacing in the corridor, we're opening up North Shore Road to provide a second left turn lane. We don't have to widen the road. We're just going to use the medians that we're taking out and some of the space that we're taking out to get that second lane. It'll store a total of 8 vehicles without blocking the right turn movement, which is the much heavier movement. Tomasello Drive is shown in its new location. It's being shifted about 185 feet from its current location, moving over. Because of the left turn volume that is existing and what we're going to be adding, we've added 2 left turn lanes coming in from Revere Beach Parkway, westbound. We've got 2 receiving lanes into the site. We're going to be maintaining 3 lanes on the outbound roadway. And based on a traffic monitoring program, as development continues, we're identifying the possible addition of a second right turn lane within the environmental documents in case it has to be done later on. But again, I'll go back to the original thing. We're identifying this based on a very car-centric model. The model itself covers all of eastern Massachusetts, west of Worcester, southern New Hampshire, and northern Rhode Island. It is a huge area that's involved in this. The numbers that are contained within the model are within that whole general area. So, you know, we've got a big retail component in it. Well, we don't have a big retail component. We've got a 500,000 square feet of retail on this. The model treats that as a shopping center, a 500,000 square foot shopping center that is double the size of Target and Stop and Shop today. We're all storefronts. We hope to have a high degree of internal capture. That's not recognized in this model at all. It loads a huge number of trips into the system. And that's why we don't believe the model. That's one reason that we have an issue with the model. The second is the concept of retail itself. We expect a lot of walk-in, we expect a lot of neighborhood services. Yes, we're hoping for traffic coming in from the outside to visit the establishments, but we don't think the numbers are going to be as high as the model is saying. So moving up the corridor. Well, this actually goes backwards a little bit. This goes back to the my favorite location, the one that I have the most problems with, the ones that I lose sleep over. This is Harris Street at Revere Beach Parkway and the State Road connection from Bell Circle. Again, our concern for neighborhood protection is reflected in this. We would like to see, Harris Street established as one way from Revere Beach Parkway back one block, just to eliminate traffic cutting through from Route 60 by Harris Street, across Beach Street, down to this intersection and turning left. We want to keep that traffic in the regional system. So, and Bell Circle will show this. On Route 1A, from Bell Circle down to this Route 16 cutoff roadway that's shown right here, the road next down to 30 feet. It's 2 lanes. We want to widen that to 3 lanes to provide a left turn movement or right turn movement from Route 60 coming through the circle directly down to this corridor. And when we do that, we have to introduce a left turn lane to get traffic that is currently turning left off of, off of Harris Street, plus the development-related traffic. So we want to put 2 left turn lanes on the Route 16 connector. They'll function the same way Harris Street does today, but not through the neighborhood. These will be dedicated lefts because in the case of Harris, we can't run the left turns with any conflict. So to continue running the ramp when we can without wasting any time on the movement, we'll run the through move at the same time we're running traffic on Revere Beach Parkway, headed, in this case, northbound. So it will be separated, it will have its own phase. It'll take the same amount of time, a little less time than Harris Street takes today. This is the intersection that we are, I'll say, most concerned with in terms of operation. This one is not going to get a whole lot better. And we do have a plan that essentially, if we have to, we add another through lane to Revere Beach Parkway, northbound, and we widen the Route 16 ramp headed up toward Bell Circle. That's our fallback if we need it. We don't want to do it now, because if we don't achieve the thresholds based on the CTPS model, we don't want to build that if we don't have to.
And the signalization will be properly phased and coordinated.
Correct. This one is probably going to operate on its own. Unless I can get into technical stuff about.
For example, Chief Guido suggested that you don't need a red arrow right out from the parkway onto.
You will. With the double left turn, you will. And also we're running, yes, it would have to be separated.
Hi, John, Ira. I'll start with this, since you got this up. I did mention this to you before. My concern was that one way onto Harris Street heading north. I know first time I just heard you say it was only 1 block. But my concern is, and I know that's Council Powers' area, and my concern is the people that are coming down Harris Street the opposite way are going to have to use those 2 small side streets,
Yep.
Butler Street, Sewell Street, Eustace Street, and there's going to be a lot of extra traffic going on those little streets from the people that are going to try and finagle their way around the area.
No argument, but I think that We have not done any measurement about how much of that left turn is actually a regional left turn that has jumped off and taken Beach Street, or the other part of this, the improvements that we're going to make to Bell Circle that people are trying to avoid today, we'll keep them there. We'll keep them in keep them on coming off of Beach Street, across Harris, and into Bell Circle.
Okay, but I'm wondering if you use that U-turn further down where those lights are at Railroad.
Yep.
Like you did on 1A, on Boardman Street, make them go down further to turn around and then come back up and take that right-hand turn from the Parkway onto 145. So
That becomes possible. I'm just worried about adding that much more traffic to the right turn.
Okay, fine, and I understand that.
Okay.
The other thing is, why can't we just force the people from Bell Circle down 1A if they want to get to your property? And make the turns on those new openings you're making onto Furlong and down at the other end of near Waldman.
We can. I mean, there's no left turn permitted here today.
Right.
We're
That's correct.
introducing it. But if we make it too difficult, and again, I think the corridor is going to be fine. I just don't want somebody jumping off Butler Circle and coming through North Shore Road. I want to keep them on 1A through Bell Circle and then give them a direct access in this way. So again, it's all this thing about what can we do with traffic on a regional network. So I mean, we can look at any number of things.
Right.
This is a proposal that had to be advanced because, believe it or not, we're dealing with the Mass Historic Commission along
That's
with
right.
DCR
Yep.
and DOT. I know that.
That's also why we're signalizing both Thomasell and Furlong Drive, because the idea is to get people off the site through 1A, because to be honest, a lot of people, whether heading north, that's the right road to be on, that's the first. The second then is with this improvement and making, Harris Street one way, but allowing left-hand turns onto Winthrop from Route 16, there's also get people now off of Harris and off of North Shore Road, right? So the first goal is the Route 1A corridor, because that is the most direct to our site, no question about it. But it's to free up some of the log jams that have been here for a while. I think that the other thing too, if Harris Street reverses one way for that one segment, we want to work with obviously the city of Revere on educating people, right? Signage, things like that, so that we don't suddenly just change it and suddenly everyone who's been taking it by ways or other things suddenly starts getting caught in the neighborhood too. So it is meant to be an iterative process. And these are also, I would say this too, these are the beginning of long conversations with you guys as we go through it, so that we can think about it more further. Because to be honest, the feedback's been great, even with Chief Guido was like, because you guys understand better what's happening in there. I think the good news is that there's tremendous capacity to be unlocked. And even as we unlock it, we need to understand how it operates too, because as capacity gets unlocked, people change their patterns.
Right.
So that's what we have to be aware of.
Which concern not only the Revere people, but mostly the outsiders, looking for shortcuts.
Yep.
And now they're going to go through the small streets that, in most cases, don't have any sidewalks.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the first goal is to get them on the main streets and improve the capacity, which we're doing on those main
Right.
roads. And then after that, we have to work with you to make sure that as we,
Right.
switch a one-way segment, we don't suddenly disrupt other patterns. It's not the intent.
And I'm glad you mentioned that two-lane right turn coming northbound on the Parkway to go onto Winthrop Ave. That's been a bone of contention from all the city councilors on the red light, on the stop in the red. I know it's only a 10-second stop to allow the Winthrop Ave cars to come up. But now that you're making it two lanes and you need the red light, it's almost necessary for that delay. If we can go back one more to Tomasello and North Shore Road, please. Two things. Campbell Ave, to the left. What are those markings there? What kind of work is being done there?
Right here.
Right there, yes.
That is because we're going to be breaking the median.
Okay,
And we want to enforce the idea that Campbell Ave is still only going to be able to turn right, even with the broken median. The broken median is for the fire department. And as part of this, we will probably be looking at some kind of mountable curb with edging to make it look like it's an extension of the median, but have it designed so the fire department can access.
are you going to close Campbell Ave to the width, for the width that it's now, and make them take the right rather than have it as wide as it is, because it's probably maybe about 50 feet sidewalk right now.
Yep.
So you're going to close that in?
Close Winthrop Ave, or close Revere Beach Parkway at that point, or close?
Yeah, on Campbell Ave, right there.
Yeah.
Because, that used to be, one time Campbell Ave used to be a one-way going the other way.
Yep.
And that's why you have that wide mouth
Okay.
there. So
Yep.
I don't know if you're going to
Okay,
cut it down and make them go right.
We are showing the radius changed,
Okay.
and we are actually widening that side of Revere Beach Parkway. We're widening that a few feet because we want to be able to extend the median for the turn, to handle the existing demand for the turn into North Shore Road. And we still have to maintain 3 lanes headed westbound in this
Gotcha.
case.
One last question. On the right, where the barns are, used to be, right there. What does that indicate?
This,
Right there. No, right, all those lane changes down below that.
down below
Right there,
that.
yeah.
Okay. Within the site, or coming out Tomasello, we are currently looking at a left turn only lane, a right turn only lane, and a center lane that is for lefts and rights.
Okay, excuse me, John, but is that current package being moved just that distance, about 100 feet?
It's being moved 150 feet, but
150.
today it's 2 left turn lanes and a single right turn
Okay,
lane.
so that's actually going to be the new location for Tomasello coming out?
That is correct.
Okay, I thought it was going to be further down the
No.
road, but,
Nope, it's 185 feet. And again, based on
Coming in.
demand, we might come back and add a 4th exit lane from Tomasello and have 2 rights and 2 lefts. We don't know yet, but land is being reserved. We'll know more once we go through the monitoring process, because this is the other location that is not working well in 2038.
is that a deceleration lane where the old Tomasello is?
Where
Where
the-
those dotted lines are at the bottom? Right there.
Right here, that is a potential second right turn lane into the site if we find that we need it. The existing median is closed, but if we do need a right turn lane, we're gonna start at the limit of the existing driveway, so we're not getting any closer to the creek, and add the second turn lane at that point.
One last thing. On the radius of North Shore Road coming off the Parkway,
Yes.
you have a black line. Are you filling in part of that creek area and?
No, we're
Where
not
the-
touching the creek, we're actually coming away from the creek. There's an island there that's got a
Yes.
free right turn. We're taking the island out. The radius that's there today is about 75 feet because of the island. Removing the island, we get the benefit of being able to shift the median over on North Shore Road over probably 5 or 6 feet. That gets us the second turn lane, and we found that a 40-foot radius entering North Shore Road is fine.
So you have actual 2 islands. You have a triangle, 2 triangles right next to each other.
No, we have
Coming off the Parkway onto North Shore
We
Road.
have the triangle that's existing by the gas station.
Yeah,
And
the
then we
little
have
one right there.
then we have a 6-foot median island that's a straight island, and we're taking out the 3rd island on the approach, which
Okay,
is
that's the one
another
I'm talking
triangular
about.
one.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
John and Doug, it occurs to me that it would be very helpful to superimpose on this some chronology. When you are planning to do these things, and if they're not all being done simultaneously, in what sequence they would be done. I think it would give people a better chance to understand how we can, not only what we would expect to happen and when, but how we could acclimate to these various changes, and particularly, you mentioned an iterative process. At what point do we decide whether to move forward as planned or to change? So some chronology would be very helpful, just as you've phased the development in a way.
Okay, we've got a small footnote at the bottom of the plan talking about the second lanes. We don't see the second lanes being needed before 2028. And if they are needed, though, that's our post-2028 construction. The intent is to have all of this mitigation built and in place by 2028, probably sooner, with the added things being very limited. Again, I talked about 2 intersections.
Having said that, though, I assume some of the things are going to be done first and probably before the
Yes.
development,
Yep.
and others will be done subsequent.
Correct.
It'd be helpful to know what that.
So just to go clear too, so Winthrop Avenue reconstruction. So the Winthrop Avenue reconstruction is going to be really part of Phase 1R, right? And John's going to keep going through the rest of the quarter.
By the way, I think that section is actually
Yeah, well, correct, yes, correct. In my mind, I'm characterizing Revere Beach Parkway and Winthrop as the corridor that people move through.
Winthrop Avenue is a 50-foot right-of-way on the side of the corridor.
Yeah. Yeah, Revere Beach Parkway and Winthrop Avenue actually, but yeah, correct. So,
Common parlance.
yeah, it's common parlance. I think the idea is that this section of Revere Beach Parkway and the Winthrop Avenue sections you're going to see are Phase 1R. The Route 1A Super Street is really towards Phase 2, right? It's a major reconstruction, right? And we're going to need time to design it and get through it too. So we would end up probably with 2 phases, Phase 1R and 1B going forward. And then the reconstruction happens of Route 1A as we get into the Phase 2 of the project.
Just a word of caution.
Yep.
You're improving Winthrop Avenue, Revere Beach Parkway, which makes it a more attractive route than it is today. You're not improving Route 1A until Phase 2, which means the local streets will become more attractive while the regional roadways will not. I mean, from some point of view, from Revere's perspective, the reverse would be much preferable. Make the regional highway attractive to keep people off the streets. In a way, advertently or inadvertently, this reverses that. And so for some interim period, we're going to have a lot more traffic on Winthrop Avenue in the short run than hopefully we will have in the long run. And I just identify that as an issue that needs to be acknowledged and hopefully to some extent addressed.
I agree, and I think one of the things that we're talking about is going to the state and breaking the median at Furlong to allow left turns out in Phase 1R to support the Revere side and get traffic out of the side without going to Winthrop Avenue.
Big move in the right direction.
Oh, okay. And that was my primary question when I was looking at all the changes you were talking about. I was going to ask the same thing, chronology. At what point in time is this taking? Because Phase 2 is how long down the road?
So it's after 5 years, right?
Well, yeah. So 5 years is a long time.
But the break in Furlong Drive would happen with Phase 1.
Yeah, and I think when Doug talks about that, you'll see construction on 1A long before that 5 years because it has to be in place to support a certain level of development. And it's got to be open to support that level of development.
Okay, and just to make sure what you're saying, and I guess my primary concern and question going back to the timing of all these things is that we're doing Phase 1 in Revere, there's Phase 1 in Boston, there's going to be increased traffic or whatever as that's all being developed. Are you saying that all of the improvements are being made in time to support that increased traffic, or are we going to be dealing with bottlenecks and problems until such time 5 years down the road some of these things get implemented? Because that don't sound good.
I think that we are understanding how the development is happening and the phasing of the development itself. Phase 1 Revere has got 2 primary access points. It's pretty much Tomasello Drive and then the Winthrop Avenue corridor. The Winthrop Avenue corridor is narrow. We're going through restriping. We're doing a series of things on the balance of the corridor that's not being worked today. We want to have that in place to support the opening, only so we're not in the middle of a corridor disrupting traffic trying to get to and from a development. Phase 1 Boston is primarily an office development or a commercial development of the numbers 1 million square feet of office. That traffic to us is a reverse commute. Traffic will be coming into the site in the morning, low direction northbound flow. They'll be leaving the site in the afternoon, low volume southbound direction flow. That traffic, though, we're not going to break the median at Tomasello Drive at that point because we're not ready to do the super street. It's not warranted. We've got a whole series of issues that we're dealing with. So that traffic from the first phase of development is going to go down, make the U-turn and come back unless that traffic wants to use Furlong Drive to reverse direction. But again, we are not seeing it, the 1A corridor as being a critical thing other than to repair the existing condition based on the development. And I think that's where we're at. When we get into Phase 2, we introduce residential and that type of thing. We need to have the capacity in the 1A corridor.
I would just to go back, though, to your point, John, if you could introduce into that mix, not just Tomasello and Winthrop, but also Furlong. Furlong is an alternative to Winthrop Avenue.
Yes, it is.
And if you could advance that access Even though it will not be part of the full super street, it would undoubtedly relieve the burden on Winthrop Avenue and the Parkway to some extent.
Right, and it will also relieve the issue associated with the existing U-turn that has to merge with the RAM traffic, because as part of the median break at Furlong, we'll build 6 lanes on the Route 1A corridor, and the 6 lanes will extend 600 feet or 700 feet from Furlong Drive, so it'll be like, we're starting the corridor, folks. We're going to give traffic coming on from Winthrop Avenue time to merge, and we're going to make the conditions better. So, yes, I think the phased approach in that case, Furlong is the way to go with Phase 1 Revere.
Okay, yeah, because, there's a big concern with if that 1A isn't set up, people are not going to want to go out and get caught up in the mess out on 1A if that hasn't been improved. And then they're going to take the exit onto the Revere Beach Parkway in through Beachmont Square. And that's what we need to try and avoid. And particularly, and I know Revere, first phase, is residential as well as some retail, if I understand correctly. Boston, we know, is doing heavy residential, I believe, in their first phase, which will be starting.
No.
No? Okay, so you could correct me on that, but I guess my concern would be whatever's being done at the Boston end then adds more traffic that may not want to go on to 1A if 1A isn't fixed and will want to go out the Parkway.
When we have looked at Phase 1 Boston, which is primarily office, we understand how it's going to work. We're going to modify the Tomasello existing left turn lane, and we're going to put a median in to prohibit anybody from going from Tomasello and making a left turn. Today, morning peak hour, there are 200 people that want to do it, 200 people that do it. As soon as Phase 1 Boston starts, that's going to be restricted. And that traffic is going to end up down on Winthrop Avenue and making a left turn and coming up the corridor. But it's an existing condition. It's supposed to be a no left turn today. The sign keeps disappearing.
I think we've beaten this live
Okay.
horse long enough. It's very
Okay.
much alive and kicking, I would, but perhaps we could get to the rest of the car.
All right. Winthrop Avenue itself, Tomasello itself is right here again, 2 left turn lanes in. The design for the Red Gate project, but the Red Gate project design, that's being constructed today, is going to be modified as part of this to relocate or to modify their left turn, which I believe construction will have ending about here, but we need it for storage to get into Tomasello, so we're going to realign it but keep the driveway where it is. We're going to relocate the pedestrian crossings that are going to be getting put in here to the other side of the street, because we're adding the crosswalk right here for Tomasello, and this one becomes redundant. The design also basically takes and turns the development that's going on here, which is residential, and doesn't force people to get to the train station by coming to the wrong side of the street and then coming up the corridor. We're going to put them closer to the station with a new crosswalk alignment. DCR was concerned when the Red Gate plans were done about putting a crosswalk in this area because of sight distance. We have met with DCR, we've showed them this plan, we've talked about sight distance, we've talked about a bunch of things, and they have given us approval on our design to go with a crossing pattern on the other side of the street. Pedestrians in that case, instead of getting 7 seconds of walk, will get about 30 or 40 seconds of walk in a much shorter clearance interval with much shorter crossings.
Yeah. Joanne has a question, then I do as well.
Okay.
So, I have a little pet peeve, and I'm sure a lot of people know it. And I think I've talked to you about it. Right now, we have a bump out, and it's a very long way across the street from the rear entrance of Red Gate to the bump out. The bump out is causing havoc amongst pedestrians, vehicles. We've already had a couple of accidents where they've gone over the bump out, and I know there's no signage there yet and no lights, but if you're going to move the pedestrian walkway, then in 2 years, then why do we need a bump out now? Because I think you're going to remove that bump out, and you're going to pull the walkway down. You said closer to the train station. So That's my biggest concern right now. And I think it's ridiculous if we're going to take that bump out and we're going to move the pedestrian walkway down more towards the station. Thank you.
Okay, this plan, we've actually got two plans for this intersection. One maintains the straight-through movement. The other maintains the concept of the bump out. The bump out in this case is different from the bump out that's there. It's a much smoother and I'll say softer radius coming into it with a larger radius coming out of it. So again, if the bump out ends up staying, we've got a design that's going to change its configuration. If we're able to take the bump out, we'll have the straight-through movement. We've got to go through discussions with DCR.
Just to be clear, we don't need the bump out. The bump out was there because we show a bump out because the bump out was there on the red gate plans, so we don't need the bump out. So going forward, that's not, City of Revere does not want. I mean, we look to you guys to help us give us direction on that. As John said, we have two plans, and our original plan actually did not have a bump out. It just had the straight through.
Before we knew about Redgate, we had our own design for this that did not have any kind of control. So
I just raised one other question, and Joanne has agreed to be a little patient on the bump out to see how it works, but one way or the other, it'll be resolved. My concern about the pedestrian crossing on that side of the intersection is that it brings pedestrians from that residence and conceivably even from the hotel, although they could use Tomasello, onto the wrong side of Winthrop Avenue. You've got a Winthrop Avenue sidewalk that HYM is creating 35 feet wide, et cetera. On the other side of the street, it's like 6 to 8 feet wide, perhaps. So either people have to cross Winthrop Avenue, which they wouldn't have to do if they came across on the other side of the intersection, or they have to walk essentially on the wrong side of the street.
Yep, I agree. But again, we can manage them. We've got another signal right here at the MBTA driveway where they can come back across the street without going backwards at all. That has full pedestrian access. The issue that we have with the pedestrian crossing on the, I'll call it the west side in this case, is the fact that it's linked to the driveway that's right here. That driveway is carrying 20 vehicles in the peak hour. The crossing here is going to stop traffic for 40 seconds, even with the bulb out. I call them neck downs because I go back to this kind of design, I don't know, 35 years. But that's the issue that we have, that trying to maintain a relatively good cycle length with progression through the corridor and give up 40 seconds for a side street that may not ever be called on in a certain cycle is of greatest concern to us.
I agree. There are problems with that. Just keep in mind, what are you going to do with those people when they get over there?
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess, and I'll go back to my pet peeve is that, and this gets back to a collective group, working with the state, and in this case, the DCR, I see no reason why there should not be a walkover. Why pedestrians should have to walk across the parkway, especially with the traffic that's there. And when you think about the fact that all of this is being developed with residential and retail, there's going to be more traffic coming from the Ward 2 area and other areas trying to come across that. And it just seems to me it's going to slow up traffic, number one, and that a walkover would be, and I understand historic issues, but I think that's, I'll get off my horse on that, but I really do think there needs to be a walkover instead of crosswalks.
Okay. I'll respond to it if you want me to. Okay. With an overpass, pedestrian overpass, in order to maintain ADA requirements, the ramping system has to be grades. I'm going through it in my head to get a 15-foot clearance. The ramps have to be about 900 feet long. You can put a set of stairs in, but you have to have ramps on both sides. It's an expense, and people don't use them.
Yeah, I think
So.
the other thing too is that we went through this actually at North Point in Cambridge on Monsignor O'Brien Highway, which became Monsignor O'Brien Boulevard, right? The goal is to keep people at the street level, right? So this is not like Route 1A or something like that, right? So this is meant to be more of a boulevard that's going through Revere as opposed to the idea is we're trying to de-emphasize the vehicles in some ways in these corridors. We are providing multiple new crossings, right? And better signalized crossings as well too. And I know that people, again, first of all, this is great. This is the kind of comments that we want. I think it's really clear for the DG to know as well, too. We're not approving specific design yet of this corridor. What we're first agreeing to is, here are the parameters of the corridor we're going to go fix, right? And we're going to actually go through a lot of discussions even after the master plan's approved to go through specifically to see how does the bump out work in the future, right? How does the crossing work? The good thing about the crossing being on the right side is that people have shorter crossings, they have area of refuges, right? The crossing on the left side is you got to go a long way, right? What we also find too is that when the walk sign starts, even when it starts to blink, people still enter the crosswalk. And next thing you know, you get a pedestrian that's caught halfway through and the whole corridor just shuts down because they're trying to cross 6 lanes of traffic. This allows a segmented crossing that gets over. The other thing too is we're trying to balance it that there are full crossings elsewhere, but the load from that apartment complex is pretty light and making sure that it doesn't dictate everything that's happening in that corridor. But again, these are the kind of discussions we want to have as we go through it. So, but we are trying to be very thoughtful about how this all comes together. So I talked with Frank about this quite a bit too as well. So 2 things. So that new signalized intersection that's where our Main Street corridor comes out. And we're purposely realigning the MBTA parking lot entrance to put it aligned with it, right? So that it's a signalized intersection, right? Because right now what you have today is the MBTA parking lot is just a free exit, right? So they're going out into the intersection. The idea is to rationalize it, and it is mid-block. It also allows another opportunity for pedestrian crossing there too as well. So if people are on that side of the street, it's not just Redgate too. I mean, in the future, it's very unlikely that these might be different things in the future, right? So the idea is to try to rationalize what's happening there. The whole corridor is integrated too as well. So these aren't, again, like it's like a jug handle going back to Route 1A. Many people love the existing jug handle when someone wants to turn and get gas and shuts down Route 1A corridor because it's not integrated with any of the other signals. So the idea is that it's meant to be integrated. Now, again, we are restriping also so that there is a through lane in each direction, and the middle lane is a turn direction on both sides too as well. So again, it's meant to bring some organization to the corridor.
Oh, and again, my primary concern is the right turns out of that exit again into Beachmont Square, and the additional traffic there. So that's probably where you're going to go next. So I just wanted to bring that up in conjunction with this. Thank you.
Again, we are looking at the movement on, well, first off, we're very constrained with what we can do on Winthrop Avenue, as everybody knows. I don't want to advance that one too quick. We're dealing with a 3 lanes available under the blue line. We can't do anything better than that. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the bus stop that's in here and move it out to the other side of Washburn. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side with a bus stop heading the other direction into the MBTA parking lot. Again, that makes sure that the 3 lanes are available for traffic to move with a right turn lane that's there. The other thing that we're doing within Beachmont Square is to extend the median that is in Bennington Street across to restrict access into the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. I hate to say this, this is the only intersection I've seen, the only median that I saw, and I don't think the signs are there, but it had a left lane must turn left and a no left turn together on the same post. And people do both. So this essentially tries to free up some capacity and eliminate some confusion with movement to and from the Dunkin' Donuts right at that point. The third thing we're doing is to take Crescent Street and relocate it. Not relocate it, but relocate the right turn that is currently a free flow move that comes up. Many people in this move want to come over to the left turn lane and basically shut the roadway down. So we'd like to go back and move them back into the Crescent Street corridor where they make that more formal right turn, take advantage of all the storage that's available. And I was talking earlier about what can we do, and again, the school crossing. School crossing today, it remains green because the only real controlled approach to that other than the pedestrian is a residential driveway. Well, we're thinking about one of the things that we might do, and that's to place those signals on recall. Have the pedestrian phase come up all the time. No, not the pedestrian phase. We're going to add a phase. We're going to add a left turn, a separate left turn phase, controlled by an arrow, protected when the northbound traffic is stopped, to turn into, Everard, into Everide. That gives us a reason to stop the northbound traffic on Bennington, allow traffic to come out of Crescent to relieve pressure within the entire area. When we coordinate it, though, we may be increasing the delay for the school crossing. That's the one thing that I've got to point out. I'm not sure yet because I had a reason today to do it. So, but again, we'll address that. So again, those are the three the basic changes. The other thing, there is some permit parking permitted along State Road in this area. I think we are going to need a second southbound through lane, even understanding that we're hoping to reduce traffic on Ocean Avenue and Revere Beach Boulevard. But the demand that we see there, based on growth that is not associated with this project, is going to require some improvement like that to maintain the exclusive pedestrian phase that's really needed because we're calling it a school crossing. It's on the southbound side against the MBTA, and it's listed as permit parking, and I'm not sure whose permit is needed because it doesn't say that. Is it Revere? Okay. The other thing that we're showing here is an area within the sidewalk. We're actually pulling the curb lane out in this case. That's an area that we're trying to reserve at this point for the community path on the beach-to-beach connection. One of the things that we can do until everything gets finalized on that connection is to start with a right turn lane to get up into Winthrop Avenue from Revere Beach Parkway, from Bennington Street. But understanding that unless we're able to squeeze some other things and we find some other ways, if that community path gets built, the right lane might be lost to support the community pathway. But we could end the community pathway back here someplace and have pedestrians or have vehicles move into the street and reserve the sidewalk, in this case, for pedestrians. That's future planning. And again, anything I'm talking about here tonight is really subject to a lot of community review. We had to have something in the environmental document. So that's it for Beachmont. Okay, now Bells. Oh, don't get scared. All right, this proposal for Bell Circle grew out of our discussions here last time when the police chief was talking about, well, you know what, I think I'd really like a signal on Beach Street in the Rotary because that's messing things up. And, you know, I heard comments about what are we going to do with Everett Street? People are coming out of Everett Street and they're cutting across and taking lanes and blocking stuff and messing up the intersection. So that's where I started. The thought came to me was, why are we forcing regional traffic around a traffic circle? Why don't we put it directly into the state highway system without forcing things around? And let's use the outside of the circle for people that have to be there. The folks that are coming up either 1A or up the Route 16 connector who want to get to Beach Street or to Everett Street. Put them there, but put the balance of the traffic coming up from the Route 16 corridor into the cut-through directly. Modify the cut-through, modify pedestrian crossings and the like. Same thing coming up on the 1A southbound corridor. Rather than have that traffic come up and loop through the circle and conflict with Beach Street, get rid of the crosswalks, widen the roadway, widen the Route 60 southbound approach, and allow them to turn directly in, and more than half of the traffic that makes this move, probably 3/4 of the traffic that makes this move, will continue to pass right through the intersection without going around the circle and without messing up our progression plans. Part of that, to get to what we need, we're widening Route 60 southbound to 3 lanes. We have a 100-foot right-of-way, but in this case, the 100-foot right-of-way, there's a little 30-foot wall sitting on this side of the street. Little. The back of the wall is within the state highway layout, we believe. We haven't done a survey yet. So that just cost us 6 or 8 feet of right-of-way. So we can't widen both the northbound and southbound sides in this case, unless we're willing to take property from a series of property owners. This is a privately funded project at this point. There are acquisition costs already that have to be borne for the Route 1A corridor. And to add a series more makes it really difficult here for the regional thing, especially when, I'll jump ahead a little bit, 2038 build condition will be no worse than Bell Circle is today. That's the best I can say. I can't say it's going to operate at a level of service D or E. It will be what it is today. So, some of the other things that we ended up doing, we're going to get rid of that right turn on red sign that takes people from the stop line here and lets them go through a couple of signalized areas and controlled areas and to make a right turn onto 1A to continue northbound. We're just going to put an island in. And we're going to have it as we were talking earlier today about a bypass lane in a traffic circle that we're talking about up on Ocean Avenue or Ocean. Yeah. We're going to put a bypass lane in for that movement coming up from the connector to continue directly onto Route 1A South. The other thing, Everett Street, I think it's turning into one of my least favorite corridors for where it is. We are going to put an island in and force everybody on Everett Street to come up and to turn right to go northbound on Route 60. I'll get to that in just a minute, the replacement for that in just a minute. And then Beach Street would be controlled with a signal. And since we're not treating Beach Street as a regional roadway, that traffic is going to be basically directed around the circle to come back out. We will permit the movement here, but we're not sure how much storage we're going to have available because Route 16 is going to run. It's going to run all the way through for a while, but then we got to stop the movement here, and we back up traffic through much of that corridor.
John, question. Coming up from 16 or up from 1A, how does one get into Everett Street?
1A, the 16 movement
Either way, yeah.
is right here. They turn right, and they turn right into
Okay.
Everett Street.
So they can take a right at that new island that you're going to make
Correct.
there.
There's movement into Everett Street permitted from any direction. The movement out is what is restricted.
The highway, there are no rights or lefts turns allowed there, right? In other words, if you're coming around the loop, you can't take a right onto northbound Route 1, can you?
Go around the circle. Oh, yeah.
No, you can, well, again, we're going to encourage to northbound Route 1, Route 1A. We're going to encourage that traffic to come around the circle from Beach Street, come right down through the corridor the way they do today. Again, we're still not sure. Right now, we're going to post, based on our analysis, we're not assuming that the movement from Beach Street will happen to within this corridor. It may be able to happen during off-peak hours when we're not dealing with a lot of storage requirements. We may find that we can put a time of day restriction on that movement. Again, this is a concept. The state's seen it. The state didn't jump up and say, you can't do that. Again, they're going to go through and evaluate it the same way we have.
The capacity of what Bell Circle can actually put throughput, right? So today, there's not much capacity at all, right? Because obviously it's not operating very efficiently. So as John is saying, I think it's clear to understand is that we're rationalizing some movements, we're restraining some movements, we're improving capacities, we're adding a third lane through. So this is definitely an improvement. It just is still handling a lot of traffic, right? So again, it's not as dramatic of what we saw on the Route 1A Boardman corridor where it went from FF to CD. Unfortunately, we're really struggling to, under CTPS numbers, keep it operating at the same efficiency. Hopefully, the CTPS numbers don't transpire and it actually works better, but again, it's still a pretty significant improvement to how people get through this intersection.
And to go back to the Route 16 point you made before, the traffic would stay on Bell
Correct.
Circle, go through Bell Circle, rather than doing the Harris
Correct.
Street bypass.
The Route 60 movement is here. We widen this section of 1A to allow 3 lanes. The third lane at this point that has been created on Route 60 back by the high school goes to Route 60, and the other 2 go over the bridge. So again, that whole concept of what can we do to regional traffic to get it and to stay on regional highways.
John, if I could, again, looking at all of these improvements, what sort of time frame are we talking about?
We still have to work out the details on this, but to my mind, as soon as we improve the capacity in the 1A corridor, this has to be in place.
So the 1A corridor was the 5 years
3
or
to
so,
5
and then
3 to
this,
5 years, depending on the speed of development in
and
Boston.
then this would be within that same time frame,
Yes.
because one's got to go with the other.
Yep.
Okay. Secondly, when you talk about the improvements, I think you said it's a level what now?
It's
The
a level
current-
F today,
It's a level F. You're going to improve it to a what?
a level F.
Okay. So there, and it should, and it should be a what?
But it's a better F, and
It should be. I'm sorry.
this is 2038 design, full
Yep.
build, conservative numbers. 2038, we get back to where we are today in terms of delay.
Right. So my point though is it's a level F. You're making improvements. It's still a level F. We're talking 2038. It should be what level? This, given what flows through here,
The goal would be an E through here.
an E. So this gets back to it. I'm sorry. I'm going to bang this drum again about the need to get a collective force together to bring power to the State House to get the DOT to fix this. This has been here for so long, and now we're going to make it even worse. Even trying to make improvements, we're not going to do any better. And I guess, here again, well, I'll stop.
Important. So as we go through this, these improvements are going to be made before the fill build out of the site, right? So there will be an improvement of level of service, right? Like everything else, as you improve corridors, they suck in traffic, right? So but we also are, we say it, we're not worsening it. We're actually dramatically increasing the capacity of what can flow through this intersection, right? Which is not just for our development, it's for the 3 million square feet that's already been approved, and it's gonna jam into this intersection before we know it. It's also about other future development too. So I'm throwing it out there too, that this isn't approved.
And in 2028, it'll be level E.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, but just to go back to what I was saying, you're going to make improvements on the 1A Boardman, but we're still going to come up here and have a bottleneck.
Well, no, again, I'm going to talk 2028. This will not be a bottleneck. 2038 will be approaching a bottleneck based on what we're projecting traffic to grow to. It may be an F1 or an F2, something that has delays on one approach. DOT can manage and start looking at things. Things are going to be totally different in 2038. But again, we can start looking at approaches and what we can do for timing.
John, one other thing. I know on that Everett Street branch off to go northbound on American Legion Highway, I was talking to Frank earlier. For some reason, I remember that there was a paper street between Comfort Inn and Necco. For some reason, I remember this when we were talking about the redesign many, many years ago of Bell Circle, where they began under and over. And for some reason, in between those two properties, I remember a paper street, and I was wondering if that could be part of the package, instead of coming out, make Everett Street a one-way coming down towards Necco, and take a left out onto the highway and do your little turnaround there that you want to do at the high school, for the high school in Rumney Marsh.
Yep.
Something to look at.
Yeah, I think that we picked, as we're looking at this, again, we've done all of this on aerials. We don't have a physical street survey yet. We're adding a third lane southbound. We do have the 100-foot right-of-way when we get down here that's unencumbered by walls. But we'll add a left turn lane in, have that displaced left turn concept. So anybody coming out of Harris Street that wants to go south on 1A or back to Beach Street will be able to make a U-turn and head back. The location of that will be at Harris Street, where Harris Street takes off today. One of the advantages of this point is the fact that the high school property ends right at this point. One of the safety audit issues, one of the issues, if you're out there, you watch high school kids cross to the median, walk down the median, and then try to get across the street. There's no crosswalks, there's nothing. This introduces a crossing directly from the school to the other side of the street. It gives us that opportunity at the same time we're handling the left turn. DOT, again, didn't jump up and say, you can't do that in this corridor. We have had to add a third lane on American Legion Highway, southbound on Route 60, as we're coming into the intersection. But
John, I love the out-of-box thinking, but what do you think about that U-turn with traffic in the AM peak hour that backs up from Bell Circle past up as far as the Rumney Marsh Academy?
Yeah.
How are vehicles going to get through that and merge onto 1A.
Okay.
I mean,
It-
merge onto 60.
In this case, we're adding a third lane on 60 and recognizing what the time requirements are at Bell Circle. Today, it's 2 lanes. So we're providing probably a 40% increase in capacity of that corridor, along with extra storage between the U-turn, which is about 400 or 500 feet from the circle. That's the first, and again, we're providing that 3 lanes on the approach. It's not a very wide median to deal with to start with, but we'll have coordination in place. To me, the best type of coordination for an area like this is you stop traffic back here while you still have signals green upstream, and you clear out. We're not going to have to clear out everybody out, but we're going to have to clear out enough folks who are making that U-turn. It might be 50 or 60 or 100. We'll make sure that we can do that on any given cycle. And then when we're done with that, if there's no pedestrian crossing, we'll go back to Route 60 and let Route 60 fill in the balance, so that when the signals at Bell Circle turn green, they're ready in the queue.
And I think based upon, frankly, from current land use out of Everett Street, it's more of a PM peak that's coming out and doing the U-turn versus the AM peak. But again, we can obviously integrate those signals to make sure there's enough queuing capacity for them to get into the queue on the southbound lane.
We're probably talking about a demand of 120 vehicles in this case, and anybody who happens to come out of the Bay Bank or whatever into the corridor that wants to reverse direction. The driveway for the hotel is sitting right here. It's not part of the signal, nor is the NECO driveway, which is sitting right here. Those vehicles will continue to have to turn right to get back to Route 1, or to 1A southbound, and 60 southbound and 1A southbound by the Revere Street U-turn, which is not that high, at least during the morning and the afternoon peaks.
Can you just go back up to the slide before when you show all of Bell Circle? Because I don't know if Jim was going to bring this up, but we're a little concerned about the high school kids that do cross the street, because we've observed it ourselves. So, so if you're in Shirley Ave, what type of pedestrian accommodations are you going to put so that the kids can actually get across American Legion Highway and then get themselves down the other side, or
Into this area?
I'm having trouble seeing the street,
Yeah.
but get themselves down to the other side and then walk down to that proposed crosswalk.
Okay. First thing is we're going to eliminate the crossing in the middle of the circle as the only pedestrian facility that's in the intersection. That's going away. There'll be pedestrian crossings placed where we were originally talking about placing them on the east side of the circle. I guess we're at east at this point. Across Route 60 at that point. There'll be a direct crossing that is able to run with conflicting traffic during the phase that's handling the 1A continuation movement. So folks who are turning right will have to yield to pedestrians who are in this lower part of the crosswalk. We're also providing a crossing on the other side of the corridor to take people into the traffic circle itself with a crosswalk at this point. So for anybody who wants to do something like that, they can come down, cross, and then cross again to come back into the area. For folks coming off of Harris Street or off of Beach Street, again, we'll be putting crosswalks on the outer side, actually the west side, the east side or south side of the circle to handle the Harris Street demand that wants to come across into the area.
So basically the kids, so right now, what a lot of the kids do currently, because the current crossing system is so far out of the way, so they have to walk all the way up to the middle of the circle. So it looks like it's just moving one of the crosswalks down just a little bit. But they're still going to be having to walk up a little bit from Shirley Ave and cross over.
Yep.
So would there be any way that there could be another type of accommodation, maybe closer to Shirley Ave, that way the kids cross directly from that area? Because I'm afraid that I'm afraid that kids being kids are going to take the easiest route, which is to step across the highway and cross. So, maybe some type of accommodation further down the corridor, right where you have the pointer, just to kind of alleviate some of that, that crossing. So I think no matter you're pushing down the existing crossing system down just a little bit, but I think it may need to come down a little further.
Okay, we'll take a look at it. And Matt, if you can, please, because I'll forget. I'm getting old.
the lines in.
Also, is there any infrastructure that's being planned for biking also? So with the pedestrians and biking?
We have to talk to DOT about it. I think pedestrians we've got covered, bikes I'm a little bit more concerned about. One of the things that we will look at is getting those 5-foot shoulders we're using on Route 1A as an accommodation. Again, there is nothing else that we're tying into, which is a problem, other than 8-foot shoulders on each side of the corridor. So if we can talk to DOT and let them allow them to use this 5-foot bicycle accommodations through this, that's where we're going to be going with it. But we understand that we have to design to include bicycles and pedestrians in this whole thing.
And then one more. So when you're extending 60, taking the sidewalk off by the wall.
We're not.
Okay. So
We're holding the existing curb line.
Okay. So the sidewalk will still exist
Yes.
by the wall.
Yes, even though it's relatively narrow, it's going to stay there.
Yeah, I think the best improvement we have here is trying to get an option for the high school kids to cross earlier at a signalized intersection, so they're not doing what they're doing today, which is walking on the crosswalk until the traffic breaks, and then crossing into the median, and then walking into the median, and really creating their own path of traffic. And the idea is that there'll be crosswalks at both intersections now that are, much more signed and appropriately done.
And the barrier, the grass median that's there today will be replaced with a concrete barrier because we need the width, and we can't have the median and the offsets to the median taking up more than 4 feet versus the existing median that's about 10 or 12 feet wide. Route 16, well, last time I came here, I had one option, maybe I had 2 options. We've changed because we've done some analysis based on the 2038 numbers. And the change that we've gone to is, well, first off, Route 1 and 16 is an incomplete interchange. There are 3 missing movements from the Route 1 corridor to the Route 16 corridor. We want to try to address the 3 missing moves as we go through this. We originally started with an off-ramp from Route 1 southbound to Route 16 westbound. That was the first component that we identified as needed. And then a movement from Route 16 westbound to Route 1 northbound that can only be achieved in this area given the way the highway takes off and runs up at a 4% grade. We'd never be able to build a ramp within the right-of-way. We met with DOT District 4 in this case, and they said, well, why don't you, now that you've done all of this, add the movement that you didn't add, and that is the movement from northbound Route 1 to westbound Route 16, even though we don't think it's going to carry very much traffic. It's there. It's being provided. When we came to you last time, we had talked about closing the existing movement from Route 16 directly onto Route 1 South. We found that as we relocated traffic and continued traffic southbound on Route 6 or westbound on Route 16, we ran into a problem when we got down to Garfield and Webster Street, like too much traffic. The extra vehicles were not going to permit us to manage what had to be managed going through to get down to the next on-ramp, which is a left on-ramp just beyond Garfield and Webster. So we came back with the idea of maintaining the existing ramp, narrowing it a little bit, but always staying within the existing curb lines on either side of the ramp because of the downslope and the wetlands on both sides of the street. We've been able to do that. We've taken the 22-foot ramp down to about 18 feet, maybe even 20 feet. Added the median. Most of the width comes out of the median, and we've added the second lane coming down the southbound off-ramp that leads into the left turn lane, and then we've got the continuing right turn lane, or the right turn movement. Believe it or not, the right turn movement today is about 800 vehicles, because this is the point where traffic starts to back up because of the Tobin Bridge. People bail off the highway. As traffic continues to grow, more and more people use Copeland Street and come down Route 60.
So the key item on this, again, goes back to the concept of we're trying to do regional improvements at Route 1 and Route 16 to keep people on the more major streets and roads as opposed to the local neighborhood streets. And again, these 3 missing movements, I mean, as John said, this is an incomplete intersection and has been for a long period of time. Everyone's known about it, but this tries to complete it.
And
to take a page out of Ed's book, this is the kind of improvement that we could all get behind and sooner rather than later, because it solves existing problems, quite apart from your development. The last time we asked, this had about a $4 million price tag. Is it still in that range?
It's probably less, but I'm not going to commit to anything. I don't know what was costed out. It might have been 3.
That's encouraging.
The one thing I didn't say is that we are hoping to draw some of the side traffic down away from Route 60, directly to Route 16, and then the issue is they become the right turn moving on to Winthrop Avenue. That's the other thing that we have to deal with. At some point, they're going to get to Winthrop Avenue, and how they get there is the problem.
I would also note one other party of interest to this whole issue, and that's the casino and the Mass Gaming Commission. And this originally was conceived in the concept of the casino access issues, so perhaps we can get them to join us on
That would
this.
be nice.
John, the right-hand turn, the 2 rights that go onto Winthrop Parkway, Revere Beach Parkway, are those both signalized?
Yes,
Do they have to be?
yes. Because of the opposing traffic that we've got turning in 2 lanes coming off of the Route 16 connector ramp. And for safety reasons, when we introduce the movement from Winthrop Avenue across that, we really need the 2 lanes, and it should be signalized. It will run with,
Do they both need to be signalized?
yes, they do.
Okay. 'Cause
I can say,
I've got a different spin on it, but,
yeah.
and we can
No,
talk about it.
we can put up a,
I'm
one
just
of the
trying to make it
things-
easier, that's all.
No, one of the things that we've seen done in the past is a sign that says, right turn on red from right lane only.
Yeah.
That's something that we can look at.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done those, and I'm not sure if this one is ready for it. The angles look good, but I'm not sure if it's ready for it, but as we go through design, we'll talk to the district about it. 1A at North Shore Road and Revere Street, we talked a little bit about this earlier today. We know that the city is doing a study of the area that includes this intersection. We've tried to stay away from a lot of improvements to Revere Street at this point. We're just showing a no parking area on the east side. Our biggest thing was just observations during the morning peak of traffic in the left turn lane, spilling back out of the left turn lane into the left through lane. That causes problems because people in the left through lane now want to move to the right lane, and we lose a lot of capacity just by the mixing and the lack of being able to feed the intersection correctly. We're proposing that the lane be extended to almost 400 feet in length, replacing the guardrail with a concrete barrier. To do that, we don't have formal survey yet, but we're looking into probably having to widen the road by 2 to 4 feet, taking a foot or 2 out of each side, because we've got about an 8 or a 10-foot sidewalk on each side. We don't want to take it all out of one side, though, because it's going to make things narrow. No. Again, no. The other thing that we've identified, and I think we got a call from the fire chief about things that he'd like to see. Currently, there's a signal here that controls the southbound movement as vehicles are coming out of the fire department. There's no markings, there's nothing. We will be coming through as part of this and adding a stop line. We'll even talk to the district about doing that earlier. Whether or not we do something with a do not block the box and keep the area clear is something else that we can consider. We do not really want to control traffic on the northbound side of 1A, or of 1A in this case, as the engine itself can do that. So, any questions? Good, I'm getting out of this one quick. Next up is one that I might not get out so quick. After the last meeting, I talked with the chief about this one, and I'm not going to take his name in vain, but I talked to him about this and just bounced some ideas off of him. Route 60 today, the left turn demand to Revere Street is 400 or 5, it's close to 500 vehicles. The left turn lane is 500 to 600 feet long. People generally don't spill out of it. It's been lengthened to manage things. But what it does is it takes time away from everything else that's wanting to happen here, including the pedestrian phase, which is a school crossing to us because the charter school is right up, well, it's a little bit up the street. So what we have proposed in this case is to break the median at Breed Street, put a signal in, and allow left turns down to Revere Street, which loops around right here, and allow left turns back at that point. I know. Like, actually, the ideal point was back at Hutchinson, I'll say Hutchinson. The left turn used to be right here, and then there was a triple fatal that led to the closure of the medians. Yep. And so the concept of putting, again, something that could have been done rather than closing the intersection would have been to put signals back and through here to control the left turn at this point. And we're only controlling the left turn, we're not controlling the through movement headed, in this case, headed southbound. We were looking at here because this is where the desire was. Revere Street is really dumping out here. The Revere Street movement headed back to 60 is right here. People aren't going up to the intersection to make that right turn. The right turn is very low. But I looked at the intersection down at Revere Street, and I don't want to introduce a left turn movement of 400 vehicles down into that corridor and mix with the intersections that are down there. I'd rather do it at Breed Street, so we proposed it at Breed Street.
Will there be a signal under this arrangement at Breed and Revere?
No, the demand won't warrant it because we're taking so much traffic off of Revere Street. Brown Circle.
It helps to have the chief's endorsement.
I know. I told him if there was ever a public hearing or a meeting in the area, he had to come. Again, this is the same thing that we've been carrying for a long time, Brown Circle. Mass DOT is very close to issuing guidelines on how it should be striped, but it is a major traffic circle. We're not going to try to do anything to it because while it may not be working that well, there's nothing that's going to work much better than it. And that's it. You can finish if you'd like.
So again, going back, the traffic study was submitted with the DEIR as well as what will be with the Revere Special Permit submission. There are a lot more intersections that are addressed too as well in detail. Again, there is detailed level of service tables. And I do want to go back to Bell Circle. Bell Circle is actually a series of intersections that all work together. So, and again, what John was referencing on the CTPS numbers, we're hovering at similar conditions. The TOD numbers, there are certain movements that do improve above a level of service F. But again, Bell Circle is a highly complicated intersection with several series of intersections that go through it. So I just want to be clear about that. And again, just give you a sense of, it's a very comprehensive study. There's a lot of other intersections that have been addressed. There's also some intersections that weren't addressed, but some of them, those are actually being currently studied by the city, currently in their Ocean Boulevard and Revere Beach Boulevard study as well too. And we actually, so some of those things will come out and we'll be talking about too in more detail as we go through it. Again, this is just kind of the summary. We've been here a long time. We're already past our closing time. I don't want to reiterate it. But we, again, good news is that we are making major improvements, improving capacities, either improving level of service or maintaining it, right? Again, which, Ed, I know, we're going to shoot higher. But definitely not a blue line issue, not a bus line issue. $50 million of off-site traffic mitigation measures. And again, it's a pretty comprehensive thing. So, but we do agree our next steps is really to work with the City of Revere, Mass DOT, and East Boston, or City of Boston, to really try to even push this further as we go forward. So,
if there are no other comments or questions, as you said, we have gone over time, but well worth it, I think, for this purpose. Danny?
I didn't hear much talk about casino traffic. It was the casino which is opening in June, and we're the only city surrounding community with no mitigation agreement. But I believe that maybe Mayor Arrigo could rectify this problem. I believe you can go before the Mass Gaming Commission and say your community is suffering from traffic that is being caused by the casino. And could that be an avenue of money? Could you lead that voice?
Yeah, I will. First of all, pursuing a neighborhood agreement, I think, is well worth doing. It was probably complicated by suits involving the Suffolk Downs site, et cetera. But beyond that, Mass Gaming Commission has recognized that deficiency. And for example, they have provided us with $425,000 to study traffic impacts related to the casino. So they are moving in that direction. I think there is more that they can do, but I think they have started, and that's not insignificant. It's what gets Beta on board, working with HYM to address these issues. Having said that, it was well worth going over time for a critical issue. Clearly, at the beginning of this process, this was probably the issue about which most people wondered. And I think the presentation today and previously is very reassuring that you're on top of the situation, but also are going to improve existing conditions, which I think we certainly can all join you on. We are looking forward in 2 weeks' time to a community meeting that will be sponsored by the DAG with HYM, at which this entire project will be presented again. We encourage you all to come and be there and speak to these issues. But on this issue, I want to thank both Tom, John, and Doug for what I think is a very comprehensive and very positive presentation. Thank you.